Good day, I'm Junior Researcher Adam Southgate, and today's lecture will be covering the Eldritch Sphere's Dilynwyr. I'd appreciate that all hunters please subscribe as to not miss any future lectures, and also, if you enjoy the lecture and find it informative, please like the video and click the bell to ensure you do not miss any future announcements. I would also be very happy to hear your thoughts, views, and stories of your own interactions with the monsters of the spheres in the comment area of this video. Also, I'm always ready to answer any questions you may have, and please share these lectures with any hunters you feel would benefit from them. So, to begin, as always, we'll start with our general announcements. Firstly, I'd like to thank Aidan Campbell 5246 and the AI 25000 for their part in aiding the KSG in dealing with the male nymph that had crossed into England. The two acted as instructors to the KSG squad assigned to them, so that if a male nymph were to cross the border once again, they would be capable of dealing with the issue themselves. The entity had set up upon Bath Road, ironically just south of Nymph's Field, where it had already begun hunting. The two guided the KSG squad through the standard strategy for dealing with male nymphs, while also making sure not to lose any members within the nymph's pocket reality. The kill went to one Corporal Ashley Harris of the KSG, who, under the instructions of hunters Aidan Campbell 5246 and the AI 25000, took a long-range shot with a cold iron round. The body of the male nymph was recovered by the KSG for study, while the remains of all those lost within the pocket reality were deposited upon the small stretch of road. From all accounts, the cleanup took longer than the actual hunt in this case, due to the road itself not being ideal for the male nymph's territory. We are unsure why the male nymph fled across the border in such a manner. It literally seems to have rushed across as if fleeing something rather than the typical accidentally wandering over. Either way, the issue has been solved, with all involved, both hunters and KSG members, surviving. Secondly, the High Druid is finally authorized to push into Anglesey and the expulsion of the Morganian Conclave from the territory. The cold iron stockpile has now mostly been replenished after the defense of Dry Goch, and the High Druid feels that we cannot allow the Conclave any more time to dig in or continue their assault. The contract will be posted with the release of this instructional video, and again, we will be using the post section of the Order's channel for you to make decisions concerning the operation. Each day, the Order will attempt to sum up the previous day's events and also summarize the available options for you hunters to vote upon. Make sure to check the post section daily to make certain your vote is counted, and also, if you wish to make any special actions during the operation, leave a comment beneath the most recent post. Good luck to all of you. I hope to see you all on the other side. Before we can discuss the Dilynwyr, we must first attempt to explain how the entities of the Eldritch Sphere reproduce. From what we can piece together from the mad ramblings of the many Eldritch cults that we have disposed of over the years, certain common threads do begin to come together. With the birth of the sphere also came the greatest Eldritch beings, each equivalent to each other and with none above them. When these beings dreamed, though not slept, as these beings could not even comprehend the concept of sleep, what they dreamed became a kind of reality. Entities similar to themselves, though never as powerful, were born from these dreams. This process has been going on for an infinite amount of time, and each new entity is also capable of producing a weaker entity than itself within its dreams. What is difficult for us to comprehend is that each of these Eldritch beings' minds is a universe unto itself. Quite literally, these entities born of dreams exist within the minds of their parent beings. Within their own sphere, they only exist as errant thoughts in most cases. However, when breaching into our sphere, they become pulled from the mind that they once existed within. What you must attempt to visualize is that you have the minds of the original entities, each with countless lesser entities living within their thoughts, and each of those also having countless lesser entities living within their thoughts. This Russian doll effect repeats into infinite layers upon layers of universes all existing within the minds of those original entities. We are now countless layers deep of successive generations of Eldritch entities all born from the subconscious thoughts of their parent beings. When an Eldritch being breaches our sphere, they are literally a thought being pulled from the mind of another being that is most likely itself a thought, and then given solid form by the nature of their being. The Dilynwyr is thought to be at the very end of this never-ending chain, despite the paradox of that statement. To begin, the name Dilynwyr was assigned by the Order. Their true name, if they actually possess one, would most likely drive any who heard it mad, or could even possibly create a new instance of the entity in the individual that spoke it or learnt it. As a being, Dilynwyr possessed no true form, unlike other Eldritch beings that once they make the transition into our sphere gain some kind of physical presence, the Dilynwyr remain as a thought, loose within our sphere. We are unsure if they exist as a free-floating idea until they find a host, or if they simply breach directly into a victim's mind. Either way, they cannot exist without a mind to sustain them. Once attached to a victim, the 5 stages of the affliction begin. I believe it would be helpful to discuss these stages first to give a broad idea of what's happening. Stage 1. A creeping dread begins building within the victim, the effects of which become most evident in situations such as walking home at night while alone. The biggest issue with the first stage is that these symptoms only express themselves at times of natural dread, making it near impossible to identify those at this stage. Stage 2. The victim begins a pattern of risk reduction. This change in behavior will see people who once slept soundly with their doors unlocked begin double and triple checking them before entering their beds. This stage is most evident with those who enjoyed activities more associated with risk, such as mountain climbing or skydiving, as they will cease these activities suddenly. Stage 3. The victim begins closing themselves off from the world, almost literally. They will choose an environment in which they feel most safe, typically their home, and will actively attempt to remain there, becoming agoraphobic. Stage 4. A continuation of the third stage, however the victim will, on occasion, see flashes of the Dilynwyr out of the corner of their eye or within deep shadow. Its form will be based off the individual's fears. Up until now, the entity was formless, gestating within the mind of the inflicted. Now that the entity is formed, when it is viewed by the victim, even for the incredibly short period of time that is emblematic of Stage 4, it is incredibly disturbing to the victim. However, the short flashes does allow the victim some reprieve, as it is not enough time for the victim to fully process what they have seen. Stage 5. The victim now sees the Dilynwyr constantly. It is always present within their line of sight, even when their eyes are closed. The entity itself is completely unable to physically interact with the world or the victim, as stated, it exists as a thought within the afflicted's mind. The end result of this is that the victim's body will eventually give out due to the constant release of adrenaline stressing the heart to its breaking point. Due to the nature of the entity as a thought in the mind based upon the victim's terrors, the victim can never acclimatize to the images of the being and remain just as frightened of it days later as they were when first seeing it. We do not believe that the Dilynwyr have any intelligence or intent in their actions, and could even be the Eldritch sphere's equivalent to plants. They are unthinking, unfeeling beings, and on any level of reality have no agency. Again, even their form is dictated by another in the form of the victim's fears, and once their victim dies, so do they, as they have no form of their own and can only exist as a thought within another's mind. Within the Eldritch sphere, this would not be an issue, as they would most likely exist as a thought of a much greater Eldritch being, which would be similar to existing within an entire universe all its own due to how large and unfathomable these beings truly are. The Dilynwyr are perfectly suited to exist within the Eldritch sphere, living within the minds of greater beings of their sphere. However, within our sphere, they are truly devastating on an individual level. If the mind of a low-level Eldritch being is a world of fertile soil, then ours is a pothole with some mud in the bottom. If a seed lands within that pothole, well, the plant may grow to a point, but the mud will be depleted, and then the plant will die. Defining the Dilynwyr as an entity has actually caused some debate. The argument goes that as beings they possess no authentic form of their own, even by the Eldritch sphere's lax standards. The fact that their form is slowly created by the fears of their hosts they inhabit, while at first glance may appear like an intelligent or instinctual act, it may simply be that their form is dictated by the most present thought in the individual's mind, and due to them being from the Eldritch sphere, their simple presence creates a sense of fear. The earlier example, comparing them to plants, may not go far enough by this argument. They could literally be the Eldritch sphere's equivalent to misfolded prion proteins. We have observed nothing from them that could be considered an independent act. They simply exist within the host mind, while their mere presence causes the decay. The opposite side of this debate argues that due to the unfathomable nature of the Eldritch sphere, this kind of thinking put forward by the opposite side shows a misunderstanding of the sphere itself. They posit that the opposition are thinking too much in terms of our own sphere, and that due to the nature of infinity, both in the length of time the Eldritch sphere has existed and the level of intellect the greater of the Eldritch beings possess, it is impossible to reach a point where the successive generations of beings could be reduced this much. Much of their idea is based upon theory rather than direct observation. However, it is true that Eldritch beings exist on multiple higher dimensions than we do ourselves, and what we see is only a fragment of the larger beings. For example, the Earth is just a flat, curved circle within a two-dimensional universe. This is the big issue when attempting to study many entities. There is often a massive conflict between what can be observed and what the theoretical mathematics tell us. As a quick aside, I'd be interested to hear which side of this debate you fall on, and your reasonings in the comments. In general, hunters deal with this entity by locating sufferers of the affliction before they enter the final stage. If located in time, they will be given an option of use of an MMB that will need to be swapped out every 4 months or so for the rest of their lives, or access to the most immediate escape. In the past, lobotomies were used to create a similar effect in the victim as the use of an MMB. However, the success rate of this procedure was only around 30%, with many still in mortal terror of the entity but left unable to react due to the procedure. Most hunters do try to lay bare the gravity of this choice, as use of an MMB, especially long-term, has strange effects upon an individual. If rain were emotion and you getting wet were you feeling those emotions, then use of an MMB would be like standing within a greenhouse. You can still see the rain outside the glass building you're standing within, however the rain never touches you. Sadly, after about a year of constant MMB usage, most victims will decide to take the most immediate escape. Long-term use of MMBs creates a severe sense of apathy within the user. However, they appear to retain a sense of what they've given up by using the MMBs. They don't feel anything related to their predicament, however, they can observe the feelings they should be experiencing. At some point, and so far without exception, they all come to the same conclusion that life without feeling is pointless, and they take the most immediate escape. Again, due to existing solely as a thought in the victim, the death of the victim also destroys the entity. The Dilynwyr, I believe, more than any other entity, exposes our lack of understanding of the beings that we have been pitted against. Even with the collective work of all the anti-incursion organizations across the globe, we haven't even scratched the surface. The task is made even more difficult due to each sphere following its own unique set of rules, which are often contradictory. It has been put forward in the past that instead of organizations defending individual countries from incursions from many spheres, that we should instead have individual organizations dedicated to each of the spheres. The idea would be that each organization would persecute their own war against the sphere they were focused upon. However, such a system would require a level of international cooperation that humanity is simply not yet capable of. But that will be all for today. With Arthur's might and Merlin's wisdom, thank you.